Hey there, welcome back to the Impact Driven Leader podcast. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. Man, I'm excited to bring this episode to you with Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch. Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch is a retired Army officer. He and I have this great discussion where we kind of dig into the origins of modern day emotional leadership. If you've listened to the episode where I broke down the 8 paradoxes of leadership, you heard about this poet Gardner. And to me, it's this modern leadership that we see in our world. And it came from a lot of these military leaders that evolved and grew to be poet Gardner leaders. You heard about that again in the 8 paradoxes. You're going to hear about that in this conversation with Lieutenant Colonel McCulloch. One of the pieces that we break down is, when did that switch? When did that switch in the American military? And it switched much earlier than the modern corporate world has either switched or seen itself. You know, there's an article written in 2009 by Lieutenant Colonel Gerald Sewell, and he mentioned in there the value of emotional intelligence in military leadership. I've heard that from my friends. I've expressed that as people have expressed to me the value of incorporating a lot of people. In this episode with Lieutenant Colonel McCulloch, we come up with this idea of an idea cake. I can't wait to unpack it for you as you listen to this episode. As you watch maybe on YouTube, you can go to and search at the Impact Driven Leader YouTube channel and watch the full episode there. Again, thanks for being here, for subscribing, for commenting, to share what value you gain from these episodes. I love hearing that. Love being able to share it with our guests. And again, get ready to take some great notes when I sit down with Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch. Hope you enjoy this. Oak, welcome to the podcast. So good to sit with you, and looking forward to have this conversation.
Yeah, I have too, Tyler. I'm glad you had me on the program, and I'm looking forward to it. Always like to talk about leadership. Yeah,
so I want to do this. For the audience, I have already listened to the introduction, know that you long tenure within the Army, Lieutenant Colonel. But one of the things that I picked up, and you start your book with this, the definition of leadership from the Army perspective. And you go through it, like, there's a lot of definitions of leadership. There's a lot of experts. But the Army definition, when I heard that, I was like, that's very interesting. So I'd love for you to recount that, and then we'll just kind of start digging from there.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the Army definition, it isn't any different, really. I think, the wording might be a little bit different, but the whole idea is not much different than I think a Fortune 500 company would have. It talks about, it's a process of influencing people, because leadership is about people. There's a concept for you. And any leader who doesn't believe it's about people, I got to question whether or not they're ever going to be a good leader. But it's about people. It's about influencing them, motivating them, giving them a direction to accomplish a task, something that you want done. A mission, we call it a mission, but a task, a job, whatever it is you want, and to improve the organization. That's what a good leader is trying to do. And for me, it's really simple, because it has the who, what, when, why, where. It's those very simple things that even a dumb farm boy can understand.
Oh, well, you and me both. You and me both. So I want to take from that Army definition. And this has been one of the things that, as I have, really taken a step back and try to analyze leadership from how it was derived for me, as a Midwestern farm boy, and, growing up with a dad whose father was a U.S. Army cavalry, I guess, veteran, to, growing up in the 50s and 60s, and it was very dictatorial.
Yeah.
And, he had his football experience, and, that was a little bit my life, right? And as I've now evolved and seen so many different styles of leadership, that's one. And that's one that almost seems like it was embraced by society, thinking that's the only way.
Yeah.
For a small segment. I would use, and again, this is another Army veteran, Bobby Knight. was
Yes.
often the depiction of, oh, this is leadership, right?
Right.
And what I found, and this is what's so interesting in my research and discovery, and you talked about it just a second ago. And I'm going to give the audience a little bit more clue. And again, I'm putting in a lot of layers here, and there is a question. So there's a lot of layers to this. Is when you took your command at South Alabama, you went in and your first directive, as you noted in your book, was we're going to care about people.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
how you grew that program. That's what you did. But this is what I want to know. How did the military, and if I'm drawing this on for those of you who are watching, we have this timeline. The military was moving along. And again, that coming out of World War II into the baby boomer generation. And it seems like to me that corporate America went this way with their leadership style, and then the military went this way. Meaning, up and to the right for corporate America, down and to the left for the military world. As I've sat down with my friends that are Navy SEALs in the Navy, yourself in the Army and anyone else that I've talked to Marine Corps, to Air Force, and they're all like, the most important thing is caring for people.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
yet we have so many corporations, especially as we just went through the pandemic, that seem to like, well, that's not real leadership.
Yeah.
And they cite like this dictatorial, this hard facing, this imagine like this tough as nails drill sergeant that's in your face. That's the form of leadership they want to model. So
Right.
I've laid that stage. That's what I'm excited. You can see it. I'm excited. I can see the smile on your face. You're excited
Yeah.
to talk about this.
Oh,
Why
absolutely.
did those go so differently?
So I'm not exactly sure why they went differently, but I can tell you the result. The result is that you don't motivate people by being that type of a leader. You lead them by fear. They're afraid of you. And that's not the way to get things done. So I had a boss, and I firmly believe in servant leadership. And it's all about people, taking care of people, making sure that they become the best version of themselves. And it's about them and the organization. It's not about you. When we commission brand new lieutenants, because in my day job, I do the recruiting for ROTC. This year we commissioned 62 lieutenants. I walked up to every one of them and I said, celebrate today because today is all about you. You're getting to do something that very few people get to do. You're commissioning as an officer in the United States Army. After we pin those bars on your shoulder, after you're done celebrating tonight, tomorrow morning when you wake up, it will never be about you ever again. It's about the people in your organization. It's about the mission. It's about the Army. It's about the country. And then if we have time, we might talk about you, maybe.
Yeah.
So I had a boss who retired a 4-star general, and he said, Oak, this is very simple. He said, leadership is on a scale. He said, and on this end of the scale, you have micromanaging, authoritarian, do it as I tell you people. And he says, and nobody wants to work for them. We've all worked for that person. I know I have. And it is not fun. It is, you hate going to work every day. And then he said, on the other end, on this end, you have Attila the Hun in chaos. He said, and you want to be as close to chaos as you can get. He said, and here's the reason why. He said, because that's where creativity happens. Because what you have done is you've trained the people that you have working for you. So you trust them to be able to do what you ask them to do. You give them a task. Then you give them what they need to accomplish that task. You give them the resources. You give them the time, the money, the people, whatever it is that you need them to do. And then you give them the authority to make it happen. Then you get out of their way and you let them do it however they want to do it. So you get the creativity. It's no longer, they're not just doing it the way you want to do it with your knowledge and your experience and your skills. They're using their knowledge, their experience, their skills, and everybody else on the team that they're using to make that happen. And you'll be absolutely shocked at what you get.
So I'm just going to, say that I wonder how many of your generation of leaders, right? The leaders that were leading in that, we'll say up into and then just beyond the Desert Storm, all of that stuff, right? When you were in the thick of it and beyond, as an early officer, where did that switch flip?
Yeah. So when I first came in on active duty in 1986, my first battalion commander was a very people person. My second one was not. My second one was one of those authoritarian, do as I tell you, I'm going to micromanage, because if you screw up, you're going to mess up my career.
Yeah.
Okay. And so somewhere around there is where it started to switch. I always use this guy as an example. When I first met him, he was Major Martz, and I was a senior first lieutenant, and he eventually became Lieutenant General Martz. Great man, and one of the best leaders I ever worked for. And I didn't work for him for a long time, but absolutely one of the best leaders I ever worked for. And we were in this, again, we were in the 2nd Battalion's battalion commander, the micromanager type guy. And we were all used to work until 7, 8 o'clock at night, doing silly stuff mainly. But, whatever we had to do, we were in there in the office, because as long as the boss was in the office, you had to be in the office, which is what a horrible idea that is. So first day, Major March walks in. He's the new operations officer. I'm working in the S3 shop, and I'm in my office at 5:05, and I'm working on an operations order. And he sticks his head in the office. He says, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "Boss, I'm working on an operations order." He said, "Is it due tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Then go home." I thought, what? And that stuck in my mind. And when I became an S3, many years later as a major, the first thing I did was I called all my people and I said, "Look, there are going to be times when I have to work till 8 o'clock at night." I said, "Unless I specifically tell you that I need you to be here at 5 o'clock, go home." I said, "There are going to be times when I need you, and I'm going to tell you you have to be here. But if I don't tell you that, then go home." You should have seen the morale lift, right? Oh. I mean, I could just see it in their faces. It's probably the same thing that Major March saw on my face when he told me to go home. So, I think somewhere in that 1980, 85 to 90 is when people started figuring out, some people in the Army. And I think that a lot more officers in the Army, and it kind of surprises people because a lot of people associate the Army with the authoritarian. They think that's the only leadership there is in there, and it's not. The best leaders are the servant leaders that take care of their people.
And to me, again, I mentioned it doesn't matter which branch. I think each branch has their little different nuance to how they get there. Yeah. A good friend of mine, Navy SEAL, he talked about, the day they became their group, he said, all of a sudden the ranks were out the door. And he goes, I need all those guys to care for me as much as I care for them. There can't be a hierarchy. And you think about that from that leadership perspective, how special that is, because that's the reality. I may be your leader, but I'm not better than you.
No,
I don't stand at a higher place above you and look down on you and maybe just every once in a while grace you with my presence. Like, we're in this together. Now, your responsibilities may be different than mine. I may need to take a step back so I can see a different perspective, but I'm not stepping away from you. I'm stepping to a different vantage point. And, that's, again, my friends that were, corpsmen that, again, share that stuff. That's like, the effective leader is the one that learns how to practice what I call empathy. It's put your arm around someone and walk with them. In the preparation for this, I also found an article, and it would probably be released today and be like cutting edge. And you might know this gentleman. He's another lieutenant colonel of the U.S. Army, retired, Gerald Sewell. And he wrote an article back in 2009. And it was talking about emotional intelligence in the U.S. Army. I don't know if you're familiar with the article. I don't know if you know
the article. Yeah.
And it surprised me, again, that's something that today leaders are like, oh, we need to focus on, emotional intelligence. You have a lot of authors over the years, Daniel Goleman, so forth and so on. But yet now it's becoming, that's the path forward.
Right. Well, here's the why that is so important, Tyler, because leadership is about trust. It's about people, and people have to trust you if they're going to let you lead them, and they let you lead them. Yes. Let's be honest. And it's a privilege to be able to lead people, but they have to trust you. So you have to start building that trust. And the only way you can build that trust is, like you said, to be with them, to be part of them. If you're standoffish, then it's never going to happen. And this is the advice I give young men and women when I send them out there. This is how I tell them to start building trust. The first thing I tell them is lead by walking around. Do not try to lead from behind your desk. Not going to work. Yeah. People want to see you where they're at, not in your office. They don't want to come in here and talk to you in their office. you need to go down to the assembly line. You need to go down to the motor pool. You need to go down to wherever it is you work, to where the people are working, and talk to them there and get to know them there. First of all, you learn what they're doing, which is huge as a leader. Now you can actually figure out if they're doing something, if there's a better way to do it, or if you need to give them more resources or whatever. The second thing is they see you outside their office and they see you as human, like you said. So I tell them the best way to do that, there's a couple of ways to do that. I said, number one, your goal every day as a leader, as a young leader, I tell them, is to go out and find one person in your organization every day and find out one new thing about them. Not about work, something personal. Go find out their spouse's name, their kids' names. What sports do their kids play? What hobbies do they have? What do they like, don't like? Something new about one person every day in your organization. And the second way I tell people to do that is this. And a boss of mine told me this one day, and he retired a 3-star general, and he said to me, he said, Oak, never, ever, ever turn down a chance to go get your own cup of coffee. He said, no matter how high up in the organization you get, go get your own cup of coffee. He said, 2 things happen when you do that. Number one, they see you as human. Somebody doesn't have to wait on you. You can actually go get your own cup of coffee. He said, and number 2, if you're lucky, you got 2 or 3 different ways to get to the coffee pot and back to your office. Because along the way, stop and talk to everybody along the way. Ask them how they're doing today. That's something that good leaders do, is that they stop and listen to people. And I had another boss who retired a 3-star general who, for whatever reason, decided to be a mentor of mine. And I was a captain, and he was a lieutenant colonel, this is when I learned the power of listening and getting to know people. I always thought about it, and I tried to do it, but I never really understood it until then. Colonel Phil, who was Lieutenant General Phil at the end, I was walking by him. He was brand new to the organization. I was brand new. I was walking by him in the hallway, and he stopped and he said, "Hey, Oak, how you doing today?" And I said, "I'm fine." And I kept walking. And he said, No. Come here. How are you doing? Face to face, looking me in the eye, in the hallway, just talking, just like this. And I stopped, and I was telling him, and he says, "Isn't your wife's name Kelly?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "How's she doing? What is she up to? What's tell me a little bit about her." And she said, "You got 2 kids, right? They're playing in soccer?" Because I got a kid that's playing in soccer too. "Did they win this weekend?" Busy man, never once during our time talking there, and we probably only talked for about 3-4 minutes, maybe 5. Not once did I see him look at his watch like he had somewhere better to be. And I thought, I'm pretty special, until, I don't know, about a week later, I look out the door and he's doing the same thing to another captain. But it doesn't matter who he was talking to. At that moment, you were the most important thing going on in his life. And it stuck in my head. And so I make sure. And my wife, who was an Army nurse and who is a nurse, really stuck this to me even more. I'm sold on it, but she even took it one step further. We live in a condo, and we always leave. I'm always early. Both of us Army people, we're always early for everything we go to. But she even starts leaving 5 minutes earlier than we would have normally left. And I said, "Why are we leaving so early?" And she said, "In case we run into somebody in the elevator or in the garage and they want to talk, it's our opportunity, it's our duty to stop and listen to them." And I thought, wow, that's it. That's what it's about. That's people on people, because that's the most important thing, people.
I enjoyed, getting through parts of your book. And there was one thing that you mentioned in there. Again, I grew up on a farm. You talk about that. And, I've worked in a lot of different industries to where I'm at now. And at some point I thought, well, it's pretty hard to get outside of that industry because it's so different, the nuances of knowing the particulars. And then I quickly learned, and I heard you note this as well, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. People are people. As long as you have the willingness to be curious to learn about it and learn what barriers people have and help them get through that, you can have success wherever.
That's right.
And, I appreciate that so much, because so often I think whether it's organizations, boards, different executives, they think, oh, you're not qualified. You have not worked in this industry and know the ins and outs. My experience, and I'm guessing from, as you shared that your experience as well, actually you're more qualified because you don't see the abnormal as normal.
That's right. I always tell people, look, that the great thing about bringing somebody from the outside in is that they, if they're good leaders, that they take the time to learn, and they're learning from the people who are doing it. When I was growing up, my dad's best friend worked in a Chrysler plant that produced cars. And for 38 years, this man put fenders on cars. That's what he did. Whatever vehicle was being built in that plant, he put the fenders on it. So if you were taking over that plant, if I was taking over that plant and I knew nothing about anything, who would I go talk to about fenders? You better go talk to the guy that's been doing it for 38 years.
Yeah.
So when I take over an organization, and I did it when I took over the food bank, but I also did it in the Army. Every time I took over a new organization, I just took about a month and just learned the organization and the people and the process of what was going on. And when I took over the food bank, I just walked out into the warehouse, and I just walked up to a person and said, "Why are you doing that? Why do we do it that way?" Mm-hmm. And they would tell me, and I say, "Okay, so is there a better way? Do you think there's a better way? Is there something else we can give you, a tool, a process, something that would help you do it better?" And you'd be surprised. I mean, they probably wanted to tell somebody that all along, and nobody would ever stop and listen to them.
Yeah.
And I actually got that from, I was talking to a guy who worked in Walmart for years and years and years. And he said that Walton, was it Joe?
Sam
Walton, used to just show up at a Walmart. Anywhere in the country, you'd just be shocked. And he wouldn't come through the front, and he wouldn't announce that he was coming. He'd come through the back. He'd come through the receiving dock, and he'd just talk to people and say, "How's things going? Is there something we can do to make things better for you? Is there an easier way to do this?" And so I learned that, and it stuck in my mind. And so every time I take over an organization, I try to get out and I try to talk to everybody who's doing their job, and trying to figure out if there's a better way we can do it and what I can do to help them. Because that's my job as the leader, is to make it easy for them. Because if I always tell people, if you're the leader and you think, one of the most important things a leader does is comes up with a vision and a plan of where they want to go. Yep. But you're not going to get them there. The people who work for you are going to get you there. And if you don't engage them, then you're never going to get where you want to be. And I've been pretty successful in my career of being successful because I include the people who are going to get me there.
Yeah, I think, there's a point to that. You talk about going to the food bank, or, if they were going to the Chrysler plant, talking to your dad's friend, it's like, "Hey, tell me about this. What works well, what doesn't?" The thing that struck me and strikes me is that should be a plan for everyone, is that's rapport building. Because so often there's a new leader that comes in an organization, you get newly appointed to a different position, you have to go and you have to build the trust of that organization.
Absolutely.
And they're like, "Oh, okay, here comes Lieutenant McCulloch. He's got it all figured out. And, this is different here. And, he doesn't understand us and our working environment, but he's going to come in and he's going to put in all these changes. And, it's his way." But when you talk about going the other way, it's like you walk in, it's like, "I have no plan. I may have some ideas, but I have no plan." And you come in, "I just want to learn why you do what you do. Is there a better way?" That trust building, I think, in any leadership position is essential. And you mentioned it. I had a gentleman just mention it the other day. By doing that, you start to unlock all the restrictions people have on themselves.
That's right.
And the creativity grows. And all of a sudden, those different ideas, maybe that person in the food bank say, "Hey, they had a better idea." Well, maybe not, that idea works, but you combine that with 3 or 4 people, and all of a sudden, all those collective ideas do bring in some type of innovative changes. It's like, why did we never do this before? That's genius.
Well, one of the things I talk about is decision making, and that's exactly what I talk about is, if my philosophy has always been, if I got the time, and most people do, then you pull in all the people who are in your organization, the junior leaders and your subordinate leaders, whatever, and you say, okay, here's the task we have, this is the mission we have, this is the problem we have, give me some ideas. How do we fix this? How do we come up with an idea that's going to work? And what you find out when you do that is a couple of things. Number one, somebody that you think is your superstar is going to give you some dumb idea, and somebody that you think is one of your weakest links is going to come up with a great idea. You never know. I had a boss who said, a great idea is a great idea, whether it comes from a private or a general, and a dumb idea is a dumb idea, whether it comes from a private or a general. And he said, and you're the leader. You're the one that's got to figure that out, what's good and what isn't, and what to use. But if you do that, then the other thing that happens is people start, that trust thing happens. They say, well, he asked my opinion. Even if you didn't use that person's opinion this time, you might next time, but at least you asked. The third thing that happens is this, and this is powerful. This is absolutely the key, is that you'll end up taking a little bit of that person's idea, a little bit of that person's idea, a little bit of that person's, a little bit of my idea, and we'll put it together. That's our solution. And that's the key. It's no longer Colonel McCulloch's solution. It's our solution. We got skin in the game. We actually had a say in what we're going to do, and now I'm going to work extra hard to make sure it works, because it's my solution as well. And you'll be shocked at what happens when you do that.
I just thought of something brand new. I've never heard of this. Bake an idea cake. What you did is you just baked an idea cake.
Yeah.
And instead of it being your dish that you're serving that everyone else has to eat, we're like, I'm going to take a little bit from everyone, all these ingredients from different people, and this is ours. This is our collectively, not yours, and that idea cake. And all of a sudden, people can embrace that.
That's a good way to put it.
Just hit me. Good stuff. Look at that. I want to circle back. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. You took a command at South Alabama. You were given the commission there, and it was a program that was, by the words that you've kind of used to describe it, really struggling. Had been below numbers for many years. You made a decision that there was one thing that could be done to really help improve cadet morale and grow the program. And you said that we talked about earlier was care. What in your process of getting there at that position, looking through things, made you realize that was the thing that was missing, if that was the lever that was going to make the big difference?
Yeah, so I was lucky. I actually got to go to that program because I was stationed in Australia before, and and my replacement got to country a little bit early, and Australia has a law that only so many foreign officers can be in the country at the same time or whatever. So I had to leave. They didn't have a choice. So Cadet Command let me move there, and I got to be not in charge, but I got to be at that program for about 2.5 to 3 months before I actually took over. So I had the advantage of watching and seeing how things were done. And the guy I was taking over for was a great guy, and nothing against what he was doing, but to me, things needed to be changed. I noticed that the emphasis was not on the cadets. It was not on the people who you were trying to bring in and produce as leaders. And so I made the decision even before I went to my 3-week course where they teach you how to do what you got to do. And so I made the decision that was the number one thing. The two things I had to do was take care of cadets, and we as the cadre had to set the example every day for what those cadets wanted to be: an officer in the United States Army, a soldier. And so I just made it very clear the first meeting, once I took over, the first meeting that I had, that we would take care of cadets and we would set the example. And if either one of those things did not happen, you would not work for me anymore.
Yeah. So again, digging that in, because I think this is universally true. That's what every employee, that's what every team member wants. Yeah. They want to be cared for. I believe that most leaders recognize that's important. But what I do see and understand is very few leaders executing in that. Yeah. They get caught up in we have to do our work. You get like it's so often, and I imagine you experience this, is don't bog me down with the touchy-feely or the emotional things I need to do when I need to go out and I actually need to make sure that gear is ready, that equipment is ready, and all those important things.
Yeah.
And
here's what I tell you. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
now,
please.
Here's what I would say to that person. And I'm sure that at some point I might have been that person as well. I tried not to be, but this is what I would tell them. If you take care of that person, then they will work that extra hard to make sure that whatever needs to happen happens. When I was a lieutenant, I made sure that if I had a sergeant who needed to go to a school to get his promotion, that I don't care what had going on. We could have an inspection going on. We could be getting ready to do a major field. Didn't matter. That person was going to go to that school. And I actually had a lieutenant who worked with me who I actually one day said, I'm not sending that guy because we got the NTC rotation coming up and he'll go afterwards. And I said, you're taking money out of that man's family's mouth or out of their pocket and food out of their mouths because you're preventing him from being promoted. He can't get promoted until you send him to that school. So every month you put it off is another month he's not promoted. I said, that person will never trust you again because you're in this for you. If you prove to them that you're not in it for you, that you're in it for the organization and them, you're still going to get your promotion because they're going to work extra hard to make sure that they're doing what you ask them to because you're taking care of them and they trust you. So in the end, if you really do care about people, and you can't fake it, they will figure it out if you're faking it.
Yeah.
If you really do care about people and they honestly believe that, they're going to do whatever they can do to make you successful. And then you're going to get your promotion for the right reasons because you did a good job and took care of people and the organization is better, not because you were selfish and wanted your promotion. And I've worked for people, you've worked for people like that before, that you can tell all they care about is their next promotion. They could care less about you or the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not very motivated to work for that person.
Well, especially not very long.
Yeah.
You may at first, that may seem like, okay, that's my job. And, maybe you have some success and all of a sudden it goes along. And then all of a sudden you come to a point and you realize, they don't care about me.
No.
All I am is a number. All I am is a productive unit. In the moment that happens, and to your point about trust, you lose every benefit of the doubt.
Yep.
As a leader, when someone in your organization that is working with you, for you, however, when they no longer give you the benefit of the doubt, then all of a sudden you've gone the wrong way. And it's going to be really, really hard to come back.
Yeah. Richard Branson has the greatest quote about that. He said, train people so that they can leave, but treat them so that they never want to leave. And
absolutely.
I don't know if that's the exact quote, but that's basically what he said, and he believed it.
Yeah.
And I mean, he obviously a pretty successful man.
Yeah. So in your experience leading and so much of I've recognized, and I see this and appreciate this, your job in command was coaching and guiding people.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
What did you find that, you talk about that lieutenant that served with you or, even your superior officer that, really kind of had things where it was all about them. And you've probably had, different soldiers that you've worked with that they think that's the way. What did you recognize was the barrier for them? How did you help them get through those barriers to actually lead more effectively and show more care for those in their command?
Yeah, so I think, one, you set the example. So I'll just give you a couple examples. When I was a company commander, my first company command was a basic training company command. And so we were shooting gunnery. And my philosophy as a leader is as much as I can, I want to be out where my soldiers are, my people are. I got it. As a leader, sometimes you got to be behind a desk and do something. But whenever possible, you should be out. So we were out gunnery. And so these four privates were sitting up on top of a tank eating an MRE. And so I walked by. I was out there with them. I walked by. I got up on the tank. I ate an MRE with them. And I was just talking to them and just saying, okay, what's your goal in life? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
You're enlisted. What do you want to make a career enlisted? You want to go do your minimum time, get out, and go do something in the civilian world? Do you want to go to be an officer? What do you want to do? And we kind of walked through those things. And, that was just, I did that all the time. About 4 or 5 years ago, I got a call from a guy, and he said, you know what? You don't remember me, but I was one of those guys on top of the tank that day that you talked to about what you wanted to do in life. He said, I after my enlistment time, he said, I want to go be an officer. And I left and I went, did ROTC. He did a career in ROTC, retired a lieutenant colonel, and now he runs a business. But he said, I remember the conversation and you taking the time to be there with us, privates, your company commander, captain, and you're sitting there eating lunch with a bunch of privates. That's the kind of thing that they remember. And when I was at South Alabama, I made sure that the cadets understood that that's what is expected of an officer. And my cadre remind me of this all the time, because I still stay in touch with a lot of them that were in my cadre there. And they said, remember that time at Ranger Challenge when it was like 32 degrees and all the cadets were sleeping on the ground and we all had a cabin that we could have gone to, and you said, I'm sleeping right here with the cadets. And not one of the cadre went to the cabin. We all slept there on the ground with the cadets. We froze to death that night. But he said, I stay in touch with some of the cadets that were there. He said, they all talk about that still today. Mm-hmm. That you set the example. That's how you change the perception of what it is that is acceptable. I always use this example. If you're the leader and you're walking down the hallway and there's a piece of paper there and you don't bend down and pick it up, why should anybody else pick it up?
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, you got to set the example of what is acceptable to be, what you expect and what is acceptable, and then you have to hold people to standards. There's a concept for you. And people want to be held to concepts. They want to be held to standard.
Well, I believe that, and I think it ties into this next thing I want to, kind of ask you a little bit. Where does grace fit in there?
Yeah, well, I am a Christian, absolutely, unashamedly. I talk about it all the time, and I think that is what it's about. It's about taking care of, the Good Samaritan. That was just a sermon in the Catholic Church not about a couple of weeks ago. The Good Samaritan, didn't know this guy from Adam, but he was hurting. He helped him. Even took money out of his own pocket to help him get better. That's what it's about. I mean, if that isn't what it's about, if this being on this earth is not about helping other people, why are we here? Mm-hmm. I just believe that.
And I think here's where I think it goes so difficult. And going back to how we very started, where these challenges come where all of a sudden one direction of leadership style looks like very authoritative and it has to be very, very rigid. And then there's another style that realizes, you know what? None of us can walk that. No. And we can have those desires. We can want to walk that path, but understand we're going to stray at times and have that grace and care and just understand and ask why. And to me, that's a condensed version of what you've explained has gone on in the military for different reasons. And I see that in the world that we live in. And it's by expressing that grace that those accountability restrictions actually have foundation. Yes. Because without it, it comes back to, it's like, well, why is it so hard? And it said, it's hard because that's the better way, that if we all keep accountable to that, we're going to stay safer. Are there going to be days that we step sideways? Yes. Is there going to be accountability for that and consequences? Yes. And there needs to be that. But at the same point, I have to appreciate and understand why. Because if I don't in that circumstance, then all of a sudden I don't care.
Yeah. Well, I had a boss who told me, Oak, if you didn't make a mistake today, you probably didn't do anything. And he said, I don't care. And this is my philosophy. I when he told me this, I immediately took it and I run with it. And it's always been my philosophy. I don't care if you made a mistake. What I care about is what did you do after you made the mistake? Did you try to hide it? Did you blame somebody else? Or did you walk up to me and say, hey, boss, I messed up and here's how we're going to fix it. Yep. Let's go fix it. Because we're all going to make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. I keep trying to convince my wife that I am, but she's not buying it. None of us are perfect. We are all going to make mistakes, and that's okay, as long as it's an honest mistake. There's a difference between a mistake and a decision to make you make a decision to do something
Yeah.
that you know is wrong. That's not a mistake. That's a different story, and that has to be dealt with differently. But mistakes are going to happen. I guarantee it. There's no way to get around it.
Oak, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing this.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the candor, the care, the heart. And to me, it's been this great journey to appreciate, as much as I am learning and growing to appreciate, how much the American service organizations have learned and grown and figured out what I would call healthy leadership. Yeah. Not within their own, still have their own, issues, right? Every organization does. But Absolutely. Man, as my experience with yourself and so many other individuals that I appreciate and get to spend time with, it is a model of leadership that every corporation in the United States would be well suited to look into and understand, hey, that's a really good way to do it. So
yeah, well, and that is my passion at this point in my life, is to get out and talk to as many people as I can. I was just talking to a company in New Orleans in September, and I went to an HR conference last month. I'm going to a first responder conference in January in Dallas. So I want to get out there and tell people, because that is the way to get better. It really is. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to get your organization better by being an authoritarian leader. It's not going to happen. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this idea, coming up with the idea cake, where everyone's got to, put in their own personal ingredient. If as an organization, as a leader, you go to people and you ask for their input, you ask for them to share an idea, the cake you build, man, it turns out to be so much better. Just imagine if you built a cake and it was all chocolate, or if it was all flour, or if it was all eggs. It wouldn't be a cake, and it wouldn't taste near as good. That's the same as this idea cake that we came up with. The other thing that two different pieces that I got from Lieutenant Colonel McCulloch is, one, setting the example. That's so paramount. That's so important. And in any leader, we can't forget that. The example we set, whether as a parent, whether it's just we're setting the example to ourselves, man, that's the example from which everything else comes from. I shared a few weeks ago a lesson that I learned about as part of my thought of the day. You can access that on my YouTube channels or on several of the social media channels each day. And its character is the foundation in the ability to lead. And your character is set by the example that you share it with others. The other piece that Lieutenant Colonel and I talked about, and I want to leave with this one. As I read my notes, be on the as close to chaos as possible. That's when creativity comes. And I ask you, as you're walking away from this episode and hopefully taking, reviewing your notes, is your leadership style embracing and allowing chaos in your organization? Meaning, are you allowing for maybe some uncontrolled elements? You think about the U.S. military. Man, you think they're pretty organized, right? They're structured. There's a lot of structure. But as Lieutenant Colonel McCulloch said, the great leaders are right on that edge, where it's just the amount of chaos needed for tremendous amounts of creativity. And that creativity, that innovation, is what allows an organization to thrive. And it's, can you, in your leadership style, be comfortable enough, be safe enough, be secure enough, where you allow that chaos to be a part of the organization, so that way you do have creativity and innovation. I hope you got value from today's episode. I sure did in our conversation. Love the interaction I get to have with each of the guests. I would love for you to share this with someone. If it could bring value to someone in your organization, please share it with them. Give Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch a little nod for what he shared today. Thanks again for being here. And until next time, have a good one.